long history with Imago, actually. I remember when we had moved, I think, to Southborough to start this. We given this house that is now L'Abri. I think it was 1979, and we sat down very soon after that time with Lenny and Judy, and they talked about wanting to start a Christian school. And we thought, God, what have you got going for you? Not from this part of the world. What's going on? This is very daring to try and do. And evidently we didn't discourage them. And look what happened. It's awesome to see people I find this it's often happened to me, people who consult with you and you say, well, be cautious and so on, then have more faith than we have, and then they do something. So after having more faith than I had going into it. So we had a hand in the starting of it, and also several grandchildren going straight the way through. So that's been a great privilege to us to be part of it and to see it happen. I'll be speaking to Martin, and I talked about, she asked me to talk about identity. I thought if I try to carry identity, we might be out of here maybe by Sunday breakfast. And I figured we can't sell that. But I've worked on identity for a long time. And it's an issue that, unlike a lot of things you can write a book about, the issue doesn't go away and has not gone away. It's gotten more urgent, and it's happening from... No, the issue of identity, is that all right? That seems too much. Okay. I do want you to hear. It has not gone away. It's gotten more acute. We now have identity politics, which was not around when I first get interested in the study. So I'm just going to take a slice of identity that is both a piece of the whole, so smaller, but also a part that I think has been neglected and needs really being articulated. So the title is Identity and the Shape of Our Heroes. I wanted to talk about heroes and heroism here as part of our identity because it's a part of our identity that is aimed at the future. I find with a lot of discussion with identity, people aren't asking the question, who do I want to become? Who do I want to be like? All those are future-oriented ideas, things that force you to think about what's coming up and where am I going. Very often people dismiss the idea of heroism because it's for kids. People in adolescence outgrow the need for heroes, and they're adult now and they're grown up, and so they're off and running, and only kids worry about get the right hat to be the right sort of hero and so on. But I don't think that's true. I came across an interesting book not so long ago, or actually quite a while ago, by a professor at the Harvard Business School. He wrote a book called The Hero's Farewell: What Happens when CEOs Retire. And if you stop and think about that for a moment, it turns out that they retire heroically. In other words, not to the benefit of the corporation necessarily, but they are heroic when they go out. In other words, he's done a study of many retiring CEOs and find that this is a pattern that is very important to them. And so I just throw this out to suggest to you that heroism is not an age-limited idea. It's not limited to young people. It's something we're all dealing with. I'm putting theology and psychology together to get at a biblical view of both identity and heroism. I'll start with two negative experiences and then go on to the more positive heroism. The two negative ones are guilt and shame. Then we'll move on. And my theory here is that, and I think this is really true, understanding these three and how they relate really enables us to live a better life. I'll first of all compare them, guilt and shame. Feeling guilt and shame are both unpleasant experiences, but in different ways. They're both ways of measuring ourselves, but slightly different ones. To get at them, I think it's easiest to look at their opposites. The opposite of guilt is innocence, moral innocence. Guilt is falling short of some moral rules, laws, righteousness. If we disobey and transgress a law of God, we can expect guilt. But in the Bible, the opposite of shame is not innocence. The opposite of shame is honor and glory. What we might call greatness or excellence, or even the idea of heroism. God says, in judgment, I will turn their glory into shame, meaning I'll turn it into its opposite. Or those who have life's values completely upside down, God says they glory in their shame. Do you see what I'm saying? They love something about themselves that they ought to be ashamed of. Shame is felt when glory has been violated. So shame is the experience of dishonor, being and feeling unheroic, or I would sometimes call it negative heroism. Heroism recorded with minus numbers. But I want to talk about three ways that guilt and shame can go together. We'll be getting to heroism in a minute and identity for the whole time. Guilt and shame can be, the first way they relate to each other, they can be experienced at the same time, at the same event. So they're very hard to distinguish from each other. Let's say you tell somebody a lie, somebody that you know quite well, a friend or a colleague, but you couldn't bear to have him or her hear the truth, so you told them a lie. Two things happen. One, you may feel guilt because it's against the commandment of God. You also are ticked off at anybody who lies to you. And so you're liable to feel a certain amount of guilt, although not necessarily, for telling a lie. But something else is happening too. You may feel ashamed of having told the lie, which is a slightly different sense going on. You thought you were an honest enough person, strong enough person to tell the truth. You didn't think that you'd be such a wimp and so weak as to have to lie to get out of the situation you were in. You thought you were different, so you were disgusted with yourself, ashamed of yourself. You experienced negative heroism. Now you see, that's quite different. That's something of you about yourself, you about your future, you about who am I, who am I not. That's not have I violated the law of God or not. So it's quite a different sense. The example one of the clearest ones I can think of in the Bible is Peter at the arrest of Jesus. He denies Jesus 3 times, and then completely when the cock finally crows and the truth of Jesus' prediction dawns on him, he just completely collapses, and he wept bitterly. And you imagine him wanting to dig a hole and go in it and stay there a mighty long time. Now that's both guilt and heroism together. Lying, because that's a guilt against the law of God. It's a shame because he's been boasting to all his disciples. All of you bums may abandon him, but I won't abandon him. And so guilt and shame, what I'm trying to say here is guilt and shame reinforce each other, both in making a negative judgment on your lie. So the two can strike the negative message from within your own psychology is reinforced. It's like sort of two hands together. They're in focus with each other, your guilt and your shame. The second example is that guilt and shame can be independent of each other. We can experience intense shame for things that have nothing to do with moral wrong or moral truth. We all sometimes feel ashamed of our bodies. We may hang out or sink in ways, in places that Hollywood doesn't approve of. We might feel shame when we're physically uncoordinated, like, for example, we fall on our face in front of a lot of people. We feel shame for telling a joke that nobody laughs at. We feel ashamed of saying something in great seriousness that everybody does laugh at. We can feel ashamed for being rejected or neglected. All these things are not moral issues. They maybe touch on moral issues, but they're not moral issues. And yet, deep pain can be felt by any of us in the midst of them. No laws were broken. Intense shame can even self-disgust, self-hatred can be even stronger in our minds than when we make a decision that is immoral. We feel unacceptable. This shame does not reinforce our moral convictions. This shame distracts us from our moral life, basically. If, for example, we're very much into our appearance, and that's super important to us, that's a distraction from from real moral issues that are also there on the table in front of us in our lives. It doesn't reinforce morality, it distracts us from them. This is like, rather than two hands together, it's like two hands just completely independently of each other. The third way they relate to each other, and this actually will make sense how this comes together in identity to you. Shame and guilt can work against each other. They can be opposed to each other. They can pull you in opposite directions. You can be ashamed of doing the right thing or of not doing the wrong thing. Dickens' Hard Times. There's a character there who tries very hard to seduce this married woman. Thinks he has done that, but when they plan to go off together, she says, "No, I'm going to stay with my husband." He experiences heavy shame. He has failed at adultery. He has failed at being the heroic stud that was his identity, and he was proud of himself, and he's failed at that heroic image of himself. Now, that just puts on the table. So it gets to be. That's why we're so complicated psychologically. A biblical example that I've always been intrigued with is in Mark 6, the story of King Herod, the Roman tetrarch, at his birthday party. He's very impressed with how his wife's daughter dances. He promises her anything you want, even up to half my kingdom, as sort of a prize for her beautiful dancing. And he probably has something in mind like real estate. She'll want a villa along the Mediterranean or something like that, and I can give her that easily, no problem. But she goes back and gets some coaching from her mother, most of you know the story, and she comes back into the birthday party and says, "No, I want John the Baptist's head on a plate now," in the party. Not just someday, but in the party. And it says that Herod was deeply distressed, greatly distressed. And try and put yourself in his shoes here for a minute. And he was caught between what moral awareness he had, which was something, because he had recognized that John was a prophet of God. He consulted with John, counseled with John to try to find out what is right, what is wrong, what's going on in the world. And he knew that John was a holy man, a prophet of God. On the other hand, he was a powerful Roman leader who did not want to be shown to be weak and not be able to give what he'd promised to give. This girl promised what she asked for. So he did not want to be ashamed to tell her, "I'm sorry, I can't give you that," or "I mustn't give you that," as if he wasn't powerful enough. John the Baptist before the Roman Empire was small change. He didn't matter to anybody in terms of the status of the Roman Empire. Why wouldn't he have the courage to just, of course, kill him as asked? But because he had a conscience working too, he had a collision. The desire to be more powerful, or his desire to be the powerful Roman leader outpulled his moral desire to be moral, and as it sometimes does. He more feared being ashamed, being caught, being ashamed for being weak, than he feared violating God's prophet. So because there's a sense of heroism working on him that he is that he's feeling very, very strongly and wants to have as part of his identity. His fear of shame was greater than his fear of guilt. Okay, now what behind these examples, is that there is two ways of evaluating ourselves. One related to guilt, one related to shame. They can either go together at the same time for the same reason, it could be quietly, independently of each other, or they can be at loggerheads with each other and fight each other completely. Guilt comes from moral principles. This is from the law of God, from what we learn growing up, what's right and what's wrong. There are laws and disobedience to those laws, the commandments and so on, and guilt when we violate them. The experience of shame comes from violating whatever is glorious and honorable and heroic to us. We'll experience shame. It also comes from the Bible. The true shame comes defined in the Bible, for how we experience it ourselves is a mixture of what we learn from religion, what we learn from our culture, what we learn from friends, and so forth. And we internalize a sense of the heroic ourselves slowly through our lives, maybe quite suddenly, maybe with very dramatic changes in that. Again, and what is working is our life is working on our imagination. Our heroes are formed in our imagination because it's imagining what isn't there now, but what might be there. That's where your imagination kicks in, is what's not there in front of you. I don't need an imagination to see you there. I will need an imagination tomorrow to remember you because it's not right there in front of my face. But we're dealing here with the role of the imagination. We have developing there as we grow two things, aspiration and aversion. Aspiration is not just admiration. You could admire a tree, but you're not wanting to be like the tree. But aspiration is to want to actually become like a certain person, something that they have that you want. Aversion is the opposite, is to want to not be like that, to be different from that, some way, somehow. And through our lives, we develop a picture of what is greatness, what is honor, what is glory, what I would like to become, what is the kind of person I want to be. We don't have you. Probably you're old enough to not have posters of rock musicians on your walls of your bedroom, but you do have stories in your head and heart about lots of people's success and failure, all sorts of different criteria of success and failure. They're there in your head and heart, and that's what really matters and what happens to them. Many stories that you want to be like this story. You're like to be like this kind of story, and not like that. It works something like this. If you tie a string to an experience of shame that you have, if you can stop and think of an experience when you may have felt shame, that string, you follow that string and it goes back to some hero that you just trashed. In other words, some idea of the heroic, some idea of glory, some idea of excellence that you just violated. And it's and we're very different from one another. We can think of, the Bible describes it as losing face. All day long my disgrace is before me and shame covers my face. Feeling shame tends to reduce you to the very thing you're feeling ashamed of. That defines you, that limits you. You're limited to the thing that you feel ashamed of. That's where that experience of shame is a heavy-duty lie, because that's not true. That's not who you are, but that's what you can feel like. It's a famous example in the writing of actually the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. he describes this is a lighter weight than most of his writing. He describes a person in a hotel corridor peering through the keyhole of one of the hotel rooms. This was in the day when the hotel rooms had keyholes. And he's peering what's going on inside the bedroom and concentrating very, very hard on his knees. And then suddenly he hears a footstep behind him, and there's somebody watching him as he is trying to look through the keyhole. Sartre calls this an experience of shame, because you know perfectly well that you're not that you're not a voyeur. You know perfectly well that you would never do that, and yet there you are, doing it and caught doing it, you might feel heroic if you had a pistol to shoot out the lock on the door and kick the door open, as properly done in movies, but that's not the situation. You're caught eavesdropping. You're caught as a peeping Tom. And as Sartre raises the question, who is the real me? If something happens to me like this that shocks me about myself, about who I thought I was and who I evidently must be, how do I deal with that? An intensive identity collision that goes on there. But that shame is involved in doing that. And that's why it's so important to work with. The problem comes with who are your heroes. You see, in your experience, and shame depends on who you allow to be heroic for you. And we're very different from each other. And here, what is glory to you in your mind and heart? That will shape your identity into your future. Some of your heroes can be pseudo-heroes, I'd call them, which are not really heroic at all by ways that I will talk about later, but are false heroes, like, for example, Herod's false heroes of Roman greatness, which led him to commit a terrible sin, and which, if you read later, messed him up psychologically, because if you remember the story, when he hears about Jesus' miracles, he thinks, oh my goodness, this must be John the Baptist who's risen from the dead, the John the Baptist who I killed, who's come back, risen from the dead. So this is something that lived with him long afterwards. So people are making their fortunes out of warping our imaginations around stories of pseudo-heroes who can be then tyrants over us through our shame. We are shown images of people who we can never be like, doing things that we will never do, going places we will never go, and looking like we will never look. And these people do not exist, who are so perfect or so free from our frustrations. They don't exist on this planet. Nobody is like this, but they can make us ashamed of ourselves, disgusted with ourselves for falling short of them. And if we allow these images and stories to be heroic to us, they will make us feel weak, helpless, boring, and ugly by comparison, ashamed of ourselves for just being the person that God created us to be. Okay, I want to turn now and say, where does this go with respect to the gospel, the message of Christ? We are made in the image of glory of God himself. He values us. We have glory, dignity, which is he created into us. This is an anchor for us all. But after the fall, we've got a lot of problems on our hands, dealing with our own brokenness and sin, and the guilt and shame that we've been talking about. In terms of the problem of guilt, I can be very brief here. The gospel is that guilt is forgiven through Jesus by God's grace. The forgiveness of sin to anyone who trusts in Christ for their forgiveness and gives their life to Christ as their Lord. What does he do to our sin? He, according to Paul in Colossians, he nails it to the cross, and it is canceled. As we come to faith, we are forgiven and justified. That's what his death and resurrection are all about. We celebrated in Easter. We are forgiven, but by a judge who sent his son to die, to death, to secure that forgiveness for us at great cost, and so that it can come to us free by grace. We don't earn it, it's given as a gift. What about the problem of shame? What does God do with our shame? Shame of all sorts that I've mentioned. We have a great mess and tangle of ideas and actions and emotions. The gospel of Christ goes beyond forgiveness and justification that comes with it and our guilt. God's answer to our shame is that he personally accepts us in the midst of our unacceptability. Acceptance includes, but is greater than forgiveness. Let me explain a little bit. Acceptance, the way God accepts us includes his love, which is something much more than just the legal pardoning of a person. We are then also adopted into his family. He doesn't just, as a judge, doesn't just pardon us and then dismiss us and have the next case in court to perhaps pardon the other person. He pardons us and then takes us home with him and adopts us. This is the judge, takes us home with him. You can forgive someone but not want to be with them, not want to spend time with them. You can forgive someone and even and not necessarily want them on your vacation with you. But it's not that way with God. He forgives us, but he wants us in his family, even on vacations. I want to give read a short passage from a book that many of you will be familiar with. It's called Farmer Boy, written by Laura Ingalls Wilder. It's written about the boyhood of the man she married. This is a kid about 8 or 10 years old, and he's going with his father to a village fair. And his name is Almanzo. Almanzo left father and wiggled and squeezed between the legs until he came up to the bars of the stall. Inside it were two black creatures. He'd never seen anything like them. They looked something like horses, but they were not horses. Their tails were bare with only a bunch of hair at the tip. Their short, bristly manes stood up straight and stiff. Their ears were like rabbit's ears. Those long ears stood up above their long, gaunt faces, and while Almanzo stared, one of the creatures pointed its ears at him and stretched out its neck. Close to Almanzo's bulging eyes, its nose wrinkled, and its lips curled back from long, yellow teeth. Almanzo couldn't move. Slowly, the creature opened its long, fanged mouth, and out of its throat came a squawking roar. This is written all the way across the page. Almanzo yelled, and he turned and butted and clawed and fought through the crowds towards father. The next thing he knew, he reached father, and everybody was laughing at him. An amazing account of experience of shame. You do something and everybody laughs at you. But the next sentence is why this is important. The next sentence is, only father did not laugh. Only father did not laugh. Now, I mention that because this is where this is a little picture of God accepting us. The son didn't need to be forgiven, he'd not done anything wrong, but he needed to be accepted big time. Because he was not being accepted. He was being ridiculed by this whole crowd of people, most of whom were strangers to him. Only father did not laugh, and what a difference that made. But that's a hint of what I mean by God accepting us. God does not ridicule his people, even though God knows we are ridiculous much of the time in things we do, things we say, things we think. This is the faint shadow. So what I tried to show is that the gospel brings a healed relationship to us in both guilt and shame. We often wrestle with self-rejection, self-hatred, and I hear that now it's very fashionable to talk about shame, a lot of discussion about shame in psychology. But no one, at least who isn't a Christian, deals with the fact of God's acceptance in the midst of our shame. Much effort is spent on trying to get rid of the experience of shame without looking to God at all. But I want to go on the last section I'll deal with here is redeeming our imagination. I've talked about how not to have the wrong heroes and how destructive it is to have the wrong heroes. But what is it to have the right heroes? What is it to connect with the actual glory that's real and alive in this world? What is human excellence? How do we get at it? I love a line by Maya Angelou who says, "We come from the Creator, each of us trailing wisps of glory." We don't come from our Creator with holding big signs of "I'm glorious" over our head. We trail wisps of glory behind us, and something much more humble and some more realistic. Where is that glory? Where does it come from? How can it come from us as we live daily in and out before God? What is true heroism? I want to make a quick qualification here. I see true heroism as rooted in moral character. That's totally a Christian view. Lots of people today who talk about heroism have a completely different idea. Don't think that's a generic, agreed definition of heroism. It's not. This is what I'm offering from a Christian faith here. But I need to distinguish between moral character and talent. Talent is someone who has a skill. It can be an extraordinary skill. If any of us have watched the Olympics, you see unbelievable skills on the screen in front of you, and skills of every aspect of life. Someone can have amazing skill, though, without necessarily any moral character at all. Some people can be highly skilled and an absolute menace to the rest of the human race. And it's important to just make that distinction between heroism and talent. Moral character, or a person with talent may also be a hero, but their real heroism is not from their talent itself, but from a life lived with moral character. Do you see what I'm saying here? I'm not saying no talents can be heroic, but the two are very separate ideas. Moral character needs to be at a deeper level of importance to us than talents, as a foundation for our aspirations, as a foundation for our sense of identity. The talent cannot be a foundation, or it will become an idol, and it will kill us or destroy us. That rests on too many things I can't explain, but that's really the case. Think of Psalm 147. The 10th verse. His delight is not in the strength of the horse, nor his pleasure in the speed of a runner, but the Lord takes pleasure in those who fear him and those who hope in his steadfast love. So being a fast runner is a good gift of God. It's wonderful to be a fast runner. But God's deeper concern is for where we stand before him, where we stand in our fears and our hopes. So the foundation in the New Testament for heroism is the imitation of Jesus. We're created in God's image and likeness, but we're fallen. So our imageness of God is bent out of shape. Jesus was the full and complete image of God when he was here on earth. And the Christian faith lifts up Jesus as the ultimate hero, as the one who shows it in focus perfectly, and the focal point for where our aspirations need to be. What is human excellence? We find it in the life and death of Jesus. But how do we imitate him? We don't imitate the details of his life. He probably wore sandals. I wear sandals a lot. Not because Jesus did, but because they're comfortable. Okay? I had a friend, when I was in London, did some teaching on the imitation of Christ, and this guy came up to me afterward and said, Jesus is my hero now. And I said, great, well, what do you mean? It says he kicked the rat race he was unemployed. So I say, well, let's talk about this. We have some ways to go on this. But you're right. He didn't have Jesus didn't have a job. Well, is that something to imitate? Well, not really. But also there are other things on the other scale that we're not meant to imitate, being the Savior of the world. That's been tried also, and at great loss for usually many lives. But what we are focusing on is Jesus' moral character, the way he lived. A way to shorten that would be to say, imitate the way Jesus treated us. Treat other people the way Jesus treated us. All the elements are there in that. Jesus' moral character. There's 6 virtues that are actually explicitly taught in the New Testament about imitate. Do this because Jesus did it. Do this as Jesus did it, or whatever. And they occur, and I'll list them to. They're humility, love, service, forgiveness, willingness to suffer unjustly, and courage. We're to imitate him, treating each other as he treats us. Human excellence and glory is found in living these out as he did. It's not a list, do these things. We're meant to look in his life. This is a question of stories. This is a question of what he did, when he was, what he said, how he treated people. We're meant to reflect on the story of his life and let his life story encourage our imaginations to motivate us, that we might hunger for humility, love, service, forgiveness, willingness to die unjustly, and courage. A person who lives out these 6 virtues will also be the person who lives out all of the Beatitudes. The words are different, but the person is exactly the same. They'll also be the same person in whom the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit is being grown in Galatians chapter 5. Again, different words, but it's the same person. There's nothing magic about these words, but these are the things that are there that we're told to imitate. Unlike most of the heroes that are packaged for us today, you try and be like them, you'll destroy yourself. You can't possibly be like them. Some of the main male heroes in film, whatever, if I try to do any of those things, I'll probably end up in hospital or in a morgue. And I know that, and you know that too. And so it's a heroism that's disconnected from what's realistic. There's nothing more realistic than humility, love, service, forgiveness, suffering unjustly, and courage. There's nothing more in your lap, in your life, not something remote and removed. It's there for you all the time. If we get our moral convictions from the Bible, and we will also get our sense of glory, honor, heroism from Jesus. We no longer have 2 bosses. I guess I meant, maybe I didn't mention before, having your heroes and your morals in different places. It's like having 2 bosses who agree with each other sometimes, and who are totally distracted from each other other times, and disagree with what you should do in front of you, and you're mixed up in all of those. Now, if Jesus is your ultimate hero, and God is the source of the laws, the moral laws that you follow, you have one source of guidance, one source of leadership, which is your Creator. We want our life story to be like Jesus lived. His love, his humility, his service, his forgiveness, his willingness to suffer, his courage. The challenge is to be stretched toward human excellence. There's a lot of talk about excellence very, very often. How do you define excellence? Well, as a Christian, we can define personal excellence. It's being Christ-like. This is the way it's done. Someone who imaged God perfectly for his whole life. If you trust in Christ, you have already been forgiven, already accepted, already adopted, with the Holy Spirit at work in you. That's what grace means. We do this imitation out of gratitude and desire to please him out of gratitude, but also why wouldn't we strive for excellence? Why wouldn't we work toward excellence and be motivated to follow excellence? We do it as people who have been already forgiven and accepted by God. We don't imitate Christ in order that God may accept us. That's completely backwards. We are accepted by God by faith, by grace, and on that foundation we try to imitate God, to imitate Christ. So it doesn't displace the gospel. Some teaching of the imitation of Christ has been badly misunderstood in just that way. To imitate Christ because you'll then become good enough to be accepted. That's exactly backwards. So God meets us, greets us in our failures, in our guilt with forgiveness, in our shame with acceptance and adoption. But he warns you to be careful about what glory and honor mean to you. What is glory to you? What is heroic to you? Will make a huge difference, more than we actually usually realize. It will shape your identity. Pascal points to the warning in the best brief way I know. He says, the greatest baseness of man is in the pursuit of glory, but is also the greatest mark of his excellence. So he's saying that the whole ballgame is, what is glory for you? It can lead you to the bottom, to the pit, or it can lead you to be close to God, depending on what glory is. The images of glory may be tyrants beating on you, just for being the human being that God made you to be, or they may, if your heroes are Christ-like heroes, they will lead you toward becoming the person that God made you to be. Okay, I will stop there, and we will go on. I'd love to have a long discussion, but we won't have time for that. Actually, I'll mention I've written two books. One, Beyond Identity, which is a lot of this talk has come from that. Another one just on heroism, which is much more than I was able to talk about in terms of the imitation of Christ. So, thank you very much.